in Samarkand, Uzbekistan.
Reporting from New York for WION.
Creates ripples across oceans.
Hello and welcome to the India Story, the program that tells you all the big events taking place in India and analyzes them for a global audience. I'm Vikram Chandra. This week on the show, the Parliament has passed a key legislation which seeks to refine and redefine the regulatory landscape of the country with decriminalization of minor offences under 42 acts to reduce compliance burden and to promote the ease of doing business in the country. Now this is important. Why is it important? Because here on the India Story, and every time anywhere in the world people talk about the India Story, the big thing that people keep complaining about is ease of doing business, red tape. What do we do about it? So if steps are being taken to cut that red tape, it is a step in the right direction. We're going to be discussing this in much greater detail on this program with a special interview with Gautam Chikermane, the person who wrote the book Jail for Doing Business, which listed many of the compliances that need to be done away with. The Jan Vishwas Bill removes some of them, and therefore it is a step in the right direction. What else needs to be done? We're going to be telling you on this program. We also have a special interview with the MPHASIS CEO, Nitin, Rakesh, coming up a short while from now. What is going to be the future of the Indian IT industry, which has pretty much been one of the key foundational bedrocks of the India Story for the last 15-20 years. What's its future, and how is AI going to be impacting the Indian IT sector in the future? Also a chat with the new woman cricketer on the block, much talked about. Minnu is going to be joining us, the first woman cricketer from Kerala and one of the very few cricketers from Kerala to join the Indian cricket team. All of that coming up for you, but first, a quick look at what made headlines in India this week. There have been concerns after some violence between two communities in Delhi's satellite city, Gurugram, which has raised concerns about the security situation and what many are calling the lack of administration. The violence erupted before a religious march by one community, and the Haryana administration's handling of the situation came under scrutiny. That was followed by prolonged incidents of violence that continued for 2 or 3 days in a place which has often been considered one of the hubs for the India Story, a place, Gurugram, where 70% of the revenue for Haryana actually comes, and a place where many international companies have their headquarters. All of this essentially involved a wanted individual, of course, Minnu, and there were videos circulating about him and whether he was going to be associated with the religious march. That was followed by violence and questions about a lack of action over the entire situation. All we can hope for is that the situation will return to complete normalcy as soon as possible. The Gujarat Chief Minister Bhupendra Patel has indicated a consideration for requiring parental consent for love marriages. This responds to a demand from certain sections of the community there in Gujarat, but the comments have sparked a debate on the constitutional feasibility of such a requirement, because some are arguing that the right to choose a spouse is a constitutional right. So there is obviously going to be considerable debate on this entire situation there in Gujarat. Moving on, the GST Council has decided to go ahead with the implementation of the 28% tax on online gaming, casinos and horse racing from October the 1st. You'll remember there had been a considerable ruckus over this, which had also been featured right here on the India Story. However, the tax panel has agreed to review 6 months after implementation. In its previous meeting on July the 1st, the GST Council had decided to levy a uniform 28% tax on the full value, on the full face value of online gaming, casinos and horse racing. The industry was up in arms, saying that this move would be a death knell, especially for the online gaming industry. And a lot of global attention this week, which has had its impact in India as well, on the fact that the global credit rating agency Fitch downgraded US sovereign ratings from AAA to AA+. Fitch has cited various reasons for this downgrade, including an already high and growing government debt burden and a steady deterioration in governance over the last 20 years. Fitch expects further fiscal deterioration over the next 3 years. This, of course, led to a lot of volatility in global markets, and the Indian markets also saw deep cuts as a result of the volatility. Meanwhile, the White House and the US Treasury have come out to disagree with the downgrade and have criticized the action. Let's move on now to our top story. You've often heard me saying right here on the India Story that one of the most important aspects of driving the India story and taking it forward is the ease of doing business, ending harassment, making sure that people who are compliant with the law have a good, easy, welcoming, benign atmosphere to actually do business in. And this is something which has been stated at multiple levels by everybody, whether it's industry or the government or experts. They all say that this is something that needs to be done. Well, there's some good news in a major development. The Jan Vishwas Amendment to Provisions Bill 2023 has now been successfully passed by Parliament. The primary objective of this bill is to bolster the ease of doing business by decriminalizing minor offences. This means elimination of jail sentences or conversion of them into fines and penalties to basically strengthen the business environment by streamlining operations, by saving valuable time and resources for both the government and for businesses. If it's a minor offence, if it's not something that requires years of prosecution, simplify the entire system. That's the principle behind this. This principle obviously needs to be extended even further, and that's what everyone's hope is, but it's a great start. And joining us now to talk about it is going to be Gautam Chikermane, the man who wrote the book Jailed for Doing Business, and a lot of the provisions that were actually amended in the Jan Vishwas Bill were also mentioned in your book. So, Gautam, we're going to ask you, you must be happy to see this being done. You may also be feeling there's lots more to be done, and I'm going to be asking you what else still needs to be done. But before I get your reactions to this, let's just quickly play for you some of the major findings, some of the major amendments that were made in this bill.
The ease of doing business is something that the Modi government has been determined to improve. In a major development that furthers this aim, the Jan Vishwas Bill has been passed. The main objective of the bill is to do away with outdated rules of criminal punishment and reduce compliance burden. This bill decriminalizes minor offences through amendments in 183 provisions of 42 acts. It converts fines to penalties with the objective of avoiding court prosecution, and it removes imprisonment for several offences.
हाँ, आवश्यक कई सारे ऐसे कानून हैं जो आवश्यक भी है, जिसमें जेल की भी सराखों के पीछे भेजना पड़ सकता है. अगर कोई गंभीर कानून का उल्लंघन हो तो अवश्य जेल भी रहेगा प्रावधान में. लेकिन सरल जो गलतियां होती हैं, उस या कोई पहली बार गलती करते हैं, उसको एक मौका दिया जाए, सुधरने का एक मौका दिया जाए कि वो आगे गलती ना करे. दंड हो, पेनल्टी के रूप में, फाइन के रूप में दंड हो, पर एक सरल व्यवस्था हो.
Small mistakes, technical and procedural errors that can lead to imprisonment not only causes fear but also proves to be a burden on the courts. With this bill, the aim is to lessen the burden on the legal system and simultaneously boost investor confidence and improve the ease of doing business in India. The bill seeks to establish a balance between the severity of the violation and the gravity of the punishment prescribed. Experts say these changes will enhance India's credibility as a global investment and manufacturing destination. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
And joining us now for a lot more on that, Gautam Chikermane, senior journalist, the man who actually wrote Jailed for Doing Business, a book which, how many provisions did you find, compliances and other such things which could be done away with? But 113 are gone, or 131 are gone now.
So first thing is, It has been written by Rishi Agrawal and me. So I'm the co-author. There are two.
We're going to get Rishi in here one of these days to talk about this.
You must get Rishi.
I will.
He is the data man. Now, in this particular bill, there are 183 provisions that have been decriminalized, of which 113 pertain to doing business. The others are they are outside the ambit of doing business, or let us say the corporate parts. Of these 113, if you put it in perspective, firstly, I'm delighted that the bill has been passed by Parliament. I'm delighted that after we wrote the report, the manner in which the government took cognizance of our findings. In 1 week, we had met 3 ministries, 1 cabinet secretary, and the ball was rolling at Niti Aayog. They formed a committee where each of these ministries was called. The fine-tuning of each of those, the compliances that came under those particular ministries were listed, and there was a big debate about which should go, which should stay. There was a debate about how to decide which should go and which should stay. So I'm delighted that in 1 year, we published our report.
And that's
in February.
important because a lot of people say the government moves really slowly, but here in 1 year, bang, the bill is passed, it's law.
This is the fastest that I have experienced. In February 2022, our report came out. By February 2023, the bill was in Parliament. It came in the last date, on the last day of the winter session, which is sometime in December.
And presumably this is being pushed to the highest levels.
And now we have the bill. So I think it's exceptional. The process by which the bill has passed, which is has been enacted, is fascinating in the sense that it's a usual process. The cabinet prepares the bill, it tables it in Parliament, it goes to a select committee. It generally goes to a parliamentary committee. This time it went to a select committee. The select committee gave its recommendations. Some changes were made. It was retabled. The Lok Sabha passed it. Rajya Sabha has now passed it. It awaits the presidential seal, and before it becomes law through a gazetted. So I think this.
Can I just ask one leading question? In the middle of this entire process, the fact that it was done so fast, and in your various meetings, was there this recognition that you were hearing from the government at the highest levels? Ease of doing business is crucially important. Reducing compliance is crucially important. Ending harassment, which India has been notorious for forever, is crucially important. Is that the central message that lies behind this?
So this I cannot answer in a yes, no. The government right at the top wants the change. At the political level, the government wants change. At the political level, they pushed with all their might to get this done. At the level of the organization of the meeting at Niti, we found Amitabh Kantji. He was the CEO then. He was fantastic. Organizing everything, getting the secretaries on the table, putting the force behind what he had been asked to do. Down the line, we faced resistance in the sense that who has been jailed so far? Please tell us. This was a common refrain from almost every ministry. Tell us who has been jailed so far. And my answer to all of them has been the same. Perhaps nobody, and that requires a different research. If you want, we will do that research. But my gut is that perhaps nobody has been jailed for any provision that we have listed, which is 26,134. But what does that tell you about you?
It could also be because people are paying money and not getting it.
What does that tell you about you? First, you are not doing your job, because if there is a law of the land, it is your job to ensure that, because you have been tasked with it, it is your job to ensure that the law is followed. If the law is not being followed, and if there is nobody in jail, it probably means rent seeking is happening at a mass level, which is what through anecdotal evidence we keep hearing.
And so obviously rent seeking, polite word for corruption and bribery, means that do away with the provisions and nobody can make money to start with, right? That's a logical process.
That's it. So now we there is a small layering here as well. The 26,134 provisions are there at an aggregate for all businesses in India, okay? Nowhere have we argued that each of these provisions needs to go. We are only seeking a rationalization. For instance, if you don't paint the inner walls of your latrines once every quarter, does that ensure a jail term? If you don't reconstitute the canteen committee every 2 years, despite the fact that your canteen contractor is giving you great service, is that a jail term? I don't think so. But willful tax evasion, should that be a jail term? Absolutely. willful destruction of the environment, should that be a jail term? Absolutely. Now, how much should that jail term be, etc.? What should the fine be? We sought a rationalization, not an ending of all imprisonment.
I'm going to come to some of the broader issues around this in just a second or two. But first of all, from the point of view of what the Jan Vishwas Bill has done, you said 113 specifically from ease doing business, and there's 26,000. So if you're looking at that, you think, okay, there's still a long way to go. It's less than half of the same. But how many of them do you still think need to be done? So how far on that process are we?
So firstly, I think this is a great start, as I was saying. But it is not.
It also sets the framework for
it sets the framework.
There could be a second bill, third bill.
Absolutely. This is going to happen. But it is not even the tip of the iceberg. It is a snowflake. It's a tiny snowflake sitting on top of the tip of the iceberg called excessive compliances. Now, how many of them should be retained? How many of them should not be retained? According to our estimate, about half of them can go very easily.
Okay.
But that needs debate. That needs ministerial and bureaucratic engagements to understand the ground realities. We have done our work as scholars. So as Puritans, we will say this needs to be done. But the on-ground conversations could be different, to which we are open.
Okay. Let me come to a broader issue, right? Let's now try and put this in the greater context of the India story and taking India forward, and what does it mean to make India one of the most developed and prosperous countries going forward, and ease of doing business is very clearly. You said everyone agrees, including the government, that it needs to be done. If there is one major problem that you often heard complained about in India when it comes to doing businesses, UK, let me try and put this into some sort of a framework. There are good people and there are bad people. There are guys who are complying with the law and wanting to be honest and do all the right things, and there are bad guys who are crooks and whatever, right? The objective should be that a good person should be treated with kid gloves and should never face any problems and never be harassed, and if somebody is harassing, that person should be beaten and said, go away, don't harass the person, and the bad person should be punished. In India, that quite often does not happen. Even if you're a good person, you can face harassment, you can be caught up in courts for years altogether, and if you're a bad person and there's delays happening and you are maybe facing punishment 6-7 years later, sometimes you'll just have bribed your way and got out of it. So that you want to incentivize people to be good and disincentivize them from being bad. It's human psychology. That sometimes doesn't happen here. And the delays in our processes add to that. Would you agree with that overall construct that I painted?
Yeah, I would agree with that. The incentive to do good is not very much. The incentive to do bad and run away with it is higher. So what I see this is that when the 1991 reforms happened and the quota permit Raj was ended, the tyranny of that quota permit Raj ended. What the governments and the subsequent governments after that forgot was finally there is an Inspector Raj. That Inspector Raj thrives on these compliances. With the reforms in compliances, we will see the end of Inspector Raj. Who is behind the Inspector Raj are the policymakers, various ministries. Now let me tell you how much energy of our economic ministries is going into retaining the tyranny of compliances. Every year, approximately 4,000 to 6,000 new compliances are added, or they change. They could be filings, they could be disclosures, they could be actual physical inspections. Last year, 6,815 changes happened in compliances. Last month, 636. Last week, 222, which means approximately 22 changes in compliances are happening every day. This is where the mind of our economic ministries, the officials there, the policymakers is going. This is the energy that is being dissipated to ensure that the clasp of the Inspector Raj
But those changes
remains.
could be positive changes. Maybe they're making it easier in some cases.
I doubt it. I doubt it.
You're being cynical. Okay.
I doubt it because I've seen some of these. In fact, this morning...
You're a journalist. It's your job to be cynical, which is good. But
yesterday, there were 20 new compliances that happened. Just yesterday. I'm giving you yesterday's data.
Okay.
So that is the
that
rate.
Red tape. Okay. But from the principle of it, when you see the big changes that are happening, let's try and find some big bang ideas, low-hanging fruit. Somebody watching this saying, all right, let's do something dramatic and decisive to try and change the atmosphere and signal that red tape will be cut and, boost animal spirits. When it comes to taxation, people will argue that in the last 3 or 4 years, a fair amount has happened to make it faceless, to reduce rent seeking, to make sure that you know, if you're paying your taxes, you'll get your returns really fast and the process will be streamlined. And the interesting thing, Gautam, is that the results then start to show. You're seeing the number of people who are filing tax returns. You're seeing the amount of tax coming in. If you simplify things, you make it easier to have compliance, quite often the rewards are instant. Is that a good lesson to what we should do?
I agree.
I'm going to come to some of the things that need to be done, but is that an example of what we should follow?
I agree with the processes of the tax compliances being eased. I disagree with the manner in which status quo is being continued, in the sense that you may have 6 crore filers, but of which only 1.5 or 2 crores are actually paying the taxes. So I think that the ease of paying taxes is a good thing. But if every budget you are going to keep raising the people who have to pay taxes and continue to put the burden on that small constituency of people, it's not going to work. Okay. At some point you need to reverse this. You need to end this every budget. How much tax has been reduced, etc. I don't think this is a right thing. One point here. The manner in which the PAN came for income tax is what is required for an entrepreneur. Let there be an entrepreneurial number, because each entrepreneur has to give the same information in different manner to different ministries. The Food FSSAI Act wants something else. The Environment Protection Act wants something else. The labor provisions, several of them, need something else. The state laws seek something else. If there is one enterprise, one number, like a PAN number, where, like Aadhaar for instance, if it can be digitally placed there with a flick of a button, all the regulators can get access to all the information that they need, from RBI, SEBI to food inspector, etc. I think that is where. So income tax, you mentioned, is a good thing. It's a good model. It needs to be transposed on entrepreneurial number.
So, okay, let's look at some of the big pending reforms or the quick reforms that could come. As I said, we're all in agreement that the basic principle should be reward the good and punish the bad. Are we clear on that? Therefore, the question should again be, one of the major areas obviously that we keep talking about on the show is judicial reforms. You've got to shorten the period, because long, lengthy legal proceedings, in a sense, a person who's guilty wouldn't mind a process taking 7 years. A person who's innocent wants it done, over with and finished, so that he or she can exonerate himself or herself. So you need to compress that. Would you say that that's one of the major items that has to be done?
It is. But do you really think that the judiciary is an institution that is open to reform, leave our own criticism? Do you think we can criticize the judiciary sitting out here and still remain sitting here without being hauled up for contempt? Okay. I think judiciary is a gone case. We have to just live with the nonsense that we have.
Well, yes and no. I mean, look, hang on. It's not entirely sometimes in the hands of the judiciary. There are reforms.
I'm not talking about judges. I'm talking about the entire judiciary, in the sense, if lawyers make their money through prolonging of trial, where do you think this is going to end? So if you're talking about judicial reforms, it's actually advocate reforms, where the incentives of the advocates need to change before they are taken to the High Court. Okay. Secondly, you have these SATs, you have these tribunals, right? Let us look at Securities Tribunal. The matter, somebody loses a matter at SEBI, he goes to SAT. SAT undoes what SEBI has done. They go to Supreme Court. Even the very essence of having a tribunal has been wasted. Now you should say the tribunal.
And all of that happens
after
2 years of delay.
Yeah, and look at the illiteracy. RBI came out with a fantastic proposal to protect investors. SAT unturned it. The tribunal unturned it, and Supreme Court agreed with it. I'm talking about this cryptocurrencies, where RBI did the right thing. So, but as a regulator, it did the right thing by the consumers. But okay, the judicial processes ended. So you need literacy there as well.
You're going to need hours to discuss each of these things individually and what the merits and the demerits were. So I'm looking at the broader picture. There are still ways in which you can unburden the judiciary. The government is a major litigant, right? If the government was to just reduce the amount of areas which it itself is litigating, that takes 50% of the burden out. That can be done at the press of a button. Something else that can be done at a press of a button, something which industry has been clamoring for, have a statute of limitations or a law of limitations. If something has been done and you've not been able to establish it or prove it within 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, the matter should drop. Again, that reduces 20% of the burden. 2 simple steps. 60-70% of the pressure on the judiciary could just go away. Why don't we do it?
It may not be such a straight line. I think there is enough creativity in the system to ensure that they continue. However, the points that you make are right, and I think it needs a deeper discourse. I don't know much about it, so I don't want to comment too early.
Okay, but those are the sort of things that you feel
absolutely
can potentially...
these are low-hanging fruits that can happen. You may not even need a legislative change. It could just be an executive decision.
Okay, if that happens, that'll be good. Okay, from your point of view, low-hanging fruit, what can be done next 6 months to make it? I mean, look, it's a great step. Let's not be critical. I'm glad that people have, a bill has come, passed within 1 year to say, let's ease compliance, let's make ease of doing business more important. It's a great step, but I think the question is glass half full, glass half empty, a lot more still to be done, obviously, which there is. So what would you do?
My fear is next 6 months, there is not going to be any more economic reforms.
The next 6 months after that will be elections. I think you'll have to have only 6 months now before elections.
I don't think it's going to happen. I think elections have already begun, and you can see it through the violence that's happening around us all the time. You can see it in the new nomenclatures of the opposition versus the governing coalitions, etc. That's happening. I think the entire energy of our political class is going to be on elections, and perhaps rightly so. This is a cost that democracies have to bear. Whoever comes in the next government, if the incumbent government continues, I'm supremely optimistic about the changes. If it's a new government, we'll need to see what they do.
All right, so in any case, you're working on the next set of recommendations.
Absolutely. We do our dharma.
Whoever is in
power,
it makes sense to have ease of doing business and ease of compliance.
See,
that's the way the India story will move forward, which I guess is the...
Our job is to put all the ideas out there in public domain for the political class to pick up and run with, whichever suits them or whichever they think would do good to the country.
All right, Gautam, Chikermane, been pushing a lot of the things that are there in the Jan Vishwas Bill. So congratulations. Thank you so much for joining us. Right. All right, let's move on to what some of the big international newspapers are saying about India. Could the conflict in Manipur have become an issue that the Prime Minister cannot ignore any further? The New York Times had an entire article on that, looking at Manipur and looking at what specifically needs to be done, talking about social cohesion and social unrest. That story was there in the New York Times. Nikkei Asia has a really interesting in-depth dive into Apple's plans in India. Inside Apple's India Dream is that article in Nikkei. It's talking about how Apple's expansion of production is not just a strategic endeavor. It says there are a lot of other companies will have to come into it. And while China has been the place where Apple has had, well, a lot of its bets in the past, now Apple is aiming to broaden and deepen its manufacturing operations in India. A detailed story in Nikkei Asia on that. And a number of climateChangeNews.com and many others looked at what had happened at the G20 nations meeting, which did discuss a lot on climate change. There wasn't any clear agreement, though, on emission reduction titles. So those are just three of the articles that were referring to India in the global press. The IT sector in India has been beaten down quite a bit in the recent months. This is also evident in the quarterly results of companies. A slowdown in key markets, including the US and Europe, has been one of the reasons for the stress. Analysts are of the opinion that in the short to medium term, the IT sector could continue to face headwinds. A recent report by JP Morgan also paints a similar picture of the industry. The brokerage says that deferred project starts, project halts and cancellations are likely to persist.
It's been a turbulent time for the Indian IT industry. In fact, shares of the entire IT pack have been beaten down this year. The recent quarterly earnings also reflect the macroeconomic uncertainty companies are facing. The banking crisis in the United States and Europe, high global inflation lending to a rising interest rate scenario have all led to a marked slowdown in key markets, including US and Europe. A combination of all these factors are taking a toll on IT companies. As a result, clients have been cutting costs, especially reducing discretionary spending. This has led to a reduced demand for its services, impacted deal conversions and even delays in projects. Analysts believe that the sector will continue to face these headwinds in the short to medium term. However, with the end of the interest rate tightening cycle somewhere on the horizon now, there are hopes that demand will start picking up. In fact, CEO of MPHASIS says that green shoots of activity build-up are now visible, but that this phase of uncertainty for the sector could last another 3 to 6 months. Meanwhile, the artificial intelligence disruption is also something that the industry is still coming to terms with. With many companies pouring money into AI, the jury is still out on how the integration of AI within the IT space will play out.
They've also said that increased competition for a smaller pie could trigger falling win rates, pressures on pricing and deteriorating deal terms. Well, joining me now to talk a lot more on all of that is the CEO of one of India's leading IT companies, MPHASIS. Nitin. Rakesh now joins us to talk about the outlook for MPHASIS and for the IT sector, and of course, that overall question of how AI is going to impact all of this. Nitin, thank you so much. Always a pleasure speaking to you. Let me start off by asking for your views. How is MPHASIS doing, and if you want to say something about how the broader IT industry is doing?
Thanks for having me, Vikram. I think we're going through a pretty interesting phase in our sector, and of course, in general, in the environment with the business macro as well. Firstly, I think we probably lived through a 50-year first with the kind of macro environment we've dealt with in the Western world in the last 12 months. And as we kind of emerge out of that, the last 6 months have all been dominated by the next big thing in tech, which seems to be AI. So I think from our perspective, as we always say, technology, brings up with the next big pivot and the next, wave of innovation kind of gets unleashed. I think we are at the beginning of another unleashing of a fairly large opportunity, both for us and our customers, in how they can embrace this massive opportunity to bring in not only productivity, but a whole new way of doing business, especially as they engage with their end customers. So I think it's a pretty interesting time. We are really, at the cusp of some really cool work that's going to get done.
Nitin, what's your view on IT spending in the US and Europe in the second half of this year? We're hearing reports that clients have been cutting costs, especially in discretionary spending. What's the situation that you've been seeing on the ground on that?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, the last 12 months have been a fairly headwinded macro environment, just given the fact that, we went through an unprecedented interest rate tightening phase where we went from 0 to 5%, in just 12 months in the US. And the rest of the world has followed through as well. So there was definitely, a very large cyclical downturn in sectors that were so tightly associated with the interest rate environment, whether it was parts of consumer finance, mortgages. Of course, we've seen the impact of that play out in the real estate side as well. So that definitely led to a fairly uncertain environment. I think we joke that we're still, we are waiting for the recession we were promised, but without that clarity, I think it was very hard for customers to make a decision on how to allocate spend, what kind of budgets to run with. So that has been a fairly headwinded environment, especially in sectors that I mentioned are linked to the interest rate cycles. Having said that, I think, as I mentioned in our last quarter earnings call as well a couple of weeks ago, we've started to see at least some unlocking of decision making. We've definitely seen green shoots of activity build up, even on the sectors like mortgage, where I think things are starting to pick up a little bit, given the fact that the consensus now is that we are at the beginning of the end of the interest rate tightening cycle. So I think early days, green shoots visible, long way to go. Haven't really seen complete certainty on which way the macro will head. But having said that, we're starting to see a little bit of activity pick up. I think we'll still have another 3 to 6 months of this uncertain phase before we can clearly see which way the macro is headed.
So are you in agreement with what many of the analysts have been saying about pain in the entire IT sector? And if so, how long do you believe this pain is likely to last for the industry?
We've already been in that kind of an environment for the last, I would say 3 to 4 quarters. As I mentioned, at least in our business, with the deal flow, the closure of large TCV, some uptick in activity on the decision-making side, at least there seems to be a base formation in play. I mean, if you think about the way the business is run, right, there is a origination phase where you originate opportunities, then there is a decision phase, and then there is a conversion phase. Origination was never a problem. I think there was a lot of activity in the pipeline for all of our companies in the industry. Then, of course, we've seen some movement positively in the decision making of awarding those contracts. What we haven't yet fully seen is the conversion from TCV to revenue is still a little bit slower, but I think that should improve and pick up as we get through the remainder of the year and early part of next year. So hard to call exactly, where the, where the things will turn because of uncertainty, and of course with the recent, situation around the US rating, that obviously adds a little bit more to the uncertainty. But having said that, as I mentioned, there are green shoots visible of at least activity picking up in certain parts of the segments of our business.
Nitin, in a recent interview, you said that ChatGPT has shown people what AI can do, but that your company doesn't need to compete with ChatGPT or GPT-4, but instead use it for efficiency. An interesting and an important point. Can you elaborate on that? And how do you envisage the use of AI for the industry as a whole, and for your company in particular?
I think if you think about what GPT-4 or ChatGPT is, it's really an instantation or an open source platform made available to the wide world, which basically is now applicable. From our perspective, every customer has an opportunity to use some element of AI. And, GPT-4 is one large instantation of a large language model, but that's not the only way to use AI. I think what we've seen, what the biggest impact that GPT-4 or ChatGPT has had is it has actually made this conversation mainstream with the client community and with the boardrooms. We've been on this cloud and cognitive pivot for the last 7 years at MPHASIS. We built out a whole tribes and squad model based on the front to back transformation driven by cloud and cognitive. So for us, it's been coming for a while. We've had algorithms available on hyperscaler marketplaces for better part of 5 years. But what this has really done is given us the opportunity to truly make that conversation mainstream. And the first set of applications and use cases, no surprise, coming out of how do I transform the way I engage with my end consumers. Right? The customer experience transformation is probably the biggest use case right now that we are seeing play out, whether it is through conversational AI or some element of design embedded in it. Second, we can then start thinking about how do I truly change the way we think of customer engagement and embed AI in almost every element of our engagement, whether it is customer service contact center, whether it is the app, whether it is even a physical branch where the customer is going to walk in. It's a fairly high opportunity area for that. And third, if you think about how do I change the productivity element that sits in my technology shop, right? We've talked a lot about developer productivity. So I think those are some early use cases. We see GPT-4 as a tool that can be embedded in multiple, applications. But there are other very large, powerful platforms that are being thought of. Obviously, there are large language models that will come out of almost large hyperscalers as well. So I think to me, when I say that we don't compete with GPT-4, because it's a tool that's available for us to apply to our customer businesses, and we are obviously the more tools there are, the better opportunity there is for us to continue to leverage them in creating these applications. So, we are the application side of the house. We will make applications come live through AI. We will embed AI in almost every business process, in every customer interaction, in every part of the value chain for their business.
It's still early, of course, in the entire AI cycle, but do you eventually see the benefits of AI going to the client side or coming to the IT industry, and specifically to the IT industry in India, which used to do a lot of the work that maybe people will say that now AI can do some of that work, but on the other hand, the Indian IT industry may be also positioned to say, we can help implement AI for you wherever in the world you are.
So Vikram, I think it's a bit of both. And this is not the first time that we're seeing a pivot that will impact or change some element of what we deliver and what we bring to customers. Over the last 20 years, we've had these waves come every 4 or 5 years. I think at this point in time, the opportunity is fairly large for all our companies in the sector. But at the same time, we also cannot take for granted what we do today will be done in the same way. If we don't embrace parts of what's available and embed them in our service offerings, we'll definitely have a disruptive effect from a client standpoint, because clients are looking for, if they needed a certain number of capacity, whether it was through a number of agile teams or pods, they're not going to need that much for the same level of service. But keep in mind, we're in an environment where software is still leading the world. So net, there is more demand for software each year than it was in the year prior. And that really is the big tailwind and if you now overlay that with the wave that we started with the cloud migration and the adoption of cloud in all things tech stack, I think the opportunity is still pretty large. So net, yes, there will be some cannibalization or effect of AI on the type of services we deliver, but overall, I think there's a bigger tailwind than a headwind. And we've seen that play out over the last many years. I'll give you an example. 10 years ago, a very large portion of Indian IT used to be providing testing services. That has shrunk by an order of magnitude in the last 10 years because of availability of DevOps and agile development methodology. So I think it's another way of thinking about how do we renovate our service offerings so we can continue to stay ahead of the curve as it relates to capturing net new addressable market versus just seeing the market shrink for us.
One last question, which is, of course, a question that many people are concerned about, the entire question of reducing headcounts. Are we going to be seeing layoffs and companies not replacing attrition, maybe replacing people with AI? How do you see the entire headcount and the job factor playing itself out as we go forward?
Yeah, I think I'm in a pretty straightforward school of thought there. The camp I belong to is that it's not that AI will take away jobs. It's just that people who don't use AI will lose their jobs. So I think it's a lot to do with upgrading of skills. It's a lot to do with providing the right platform for people to be able to use and embed AI in their daily life, especially in our industry. So I think it's a pretty straightforward path. We have to make sure that we create net new skills and reskill people, and at the same time, our clients will need those same services and the help on that front as well. So I think we are very focused on creating that upskilling and cross-skilling environment for our people, and of course embedding AI in many of our processes that we follow at MPHASIS itself.
All right, thank you so much, Nitin Rakesh, the CEO of MPHASIS, speaking to us on the India Story. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Now the world of sport, and Kerala has witnessed the rise of countless talented individuals, but only a chosen few have had the honor of representing our nation in cricket. Cricket not necessarily one of the sports that Kerala has been associated with. But today we've got an incredible tale to share with you, a story of sheer determination, resilience, and eventually triumph. The story of a 24-year-old prodigy from the Kuruchia tribe in the state who shattered all barriers to make her way into the prestigious Indian national cricket team. I'm talking about Minnu, the first woman cricketer from Kerala to proudly wear the Indian jersey. Last month in Bangladesh, she made her debut for the women in blue, claiming an impressive 5 wickets in 3 T20 internationals, proving without a doubt that she belongs among the absolute best. And it's a great pleasure to now be joined by Minnu herself. Many thanks and many congratulations thanks for joining us right here. You've done a fantastic job, so we all give our profound congratulations to you. How was the experience of playing for India?
Actually, it's a proud moment for me because I was waiting till after 10 years. I'm practicing for this, and after I getting there, I feel so proud of myself. Also, I was very excited to be part of Indian team.
There are so many firsts associated with your story. You're among the first few cricketers from Kerala. Only a handful of men have also played for Kerala in the Indian cricket team, and certainly the first woman. You're one of the first people from a tribal background to actually make it from Kerala to the Indian cricket team as well. Describe your journey a little bit for us, because I know it's a fascinating journey.
I started when I am studying in 8th standard. That time I used to play with boys in my home only, in the paddy fields and all. After 8th standard, I get to know that there is a women team, women cricket. My physical education teacher, 8th standard physical education teacher, told me about women cricket. And she asked me about, do you have an interest in cricket like that? And I said yes. And then she introduced me to one of our Wayanad District Association coach, Shanavas sir. And he introduced me to Wayanad district team. Like that I started.
Yeah, so I was just about to say, in a place like Kerala, where cricket is not as big as it is in other parts of the state, did it take time for you to get recognition? Now, of course, you're a superstar there in Kerala, aren't you? We even had a railway junction named after you, and you must be getting mobbed wherever you go.
Yes, of course. Now only all the people knows me because I am the only one women cricketer from Kerala to play for India. So now everyone's recognizing me because of this cricket. Also that junction, I have seen a lot of celebrities named roads and buildings like that. So even I was surprised by seeing that Minnu Money Junction. Also, I feel so proud. Even my parents, they were like, they were also so proud of me. And because I took a decision to take up cricket. So they believed in that, they trusted me and they supported me. In the beginning, they didn't supported me. And after that, they started seeing my every achievements. That time, they become more supportive.
You know, the sort of a background where you come from, the tribal background, you worked in the fields when you were young. Is this something that you're seeing a lot of in the cricket team and other places, that people from relatively poorer backgrounds, places where they didn't have all the opportunities when they were young, are now being able to transform their lives and transform their families' lives thanks to cricket?
Yeah, in my community, they won't allow girls to play with boys. And also, they were like, you are a girl, you can't do this, like that, their response. And I was like, I don't bother about anything from what others say about me, like that. I just want to play. And even my parents also was like, don't play, like that. But I just want to, I just started for a entertainment. After knowing cricket and after learning about cricket, I took as a passion and I moved forward. From ninth to my graduation, I was practicing in Kerala Cricket Academy. So that time I was not feeling any difficulty in my practice or training. After my graduation, I was like, I should travel every day 1.5 hours to reach my ground and practice there. And that was more challenging. And I was like, I can't do. I put myself down. But whenever I feel I'm going down, that time I should think that for what I started this, and I have a big dream in front of me. Like that, I bounce back.
Minnu Mani, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be tracking your career and your achievements with a great deal of interest right here on the India Story, because in many ways you represent what the India Story is all about, the sort of opportunities that people get and the way that they can take advantage of them to transform their lives. And that's all we have for you on the program this week, but we'll be back next week with all the big news stories out of India and the biggest guests to help you understand them and analyze them. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week.
The UK is bracing for another rail.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at WION.com.
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world. We do the difficult part.
This weapon has been banned, but the US, Ukraine and Russia do not find the bombs problematic.
We also tell you why what's happening.
New drug is making a difference in the fight against Alzheimer's. This medicine helps slow down a patient's cognitive decline.
We look beyond the text. We give you context.
Is China preparing for a war in the Himalayas? And tonight, we come to you with some proof.
Hypocrisy is stunning.
Do leaders mean what they say? Do they ever say what they mean? To find out how real news affects you, your decisions.
Just when Iran took one step in the right direction, its moral police is planning to drag it further back. And once again, the victim will be women.
Watch Gravitas.
Welcome and thanks for tuning in.
We don't impose our views.